So, for the early Christian contacts with Africa, our main focus will be how to identify Africa's presence and role in biblical events. Then we'll explain Egypt's role in Old and New Testament narratives. Then we'll discuss the early flourishing of Christianity in North Africa. Then lastly, we'll evaluate the Portuguese missionary attempts and their impact. So, for the introduction to the early Christian contact with Africa, we have how Africa has a rich history of Christian presence and influence dating back to biblical times. So, let's quickly explore some of the key events and figures that highlight Africa's significant role in early Christianity. So, starting with the African presence in biblical events, that's biblical presence of Africa. Africa played a crucial part in biblical events with several Africans mentioned in the Bible. So, one notable example of biblical presence in Africa is Simon of Cyrene, who helped Jesus to carry the cross during the crucifixion process. So Simon was from Cyrene, which was a city in modern day Libya, and his actions demonstrate the complex interactions between African and early Christians. So this event showcases the diversity of the ancient world and the significant role that African played in the life of Jesus. So another example of biblical presence of Africa or African presence in biblical events is the Ethiopian eunuch who was introduced to Christianity by Philip. And this can be found in the book of Acts 8, verse 26 to 40. So this encounter marked an important moment in the spread of Christianity beyond Jerusalem. So the Ethiopian eunuch story highlights the early Christian mission to reach beyond the boundaries of tradition and also Jewish communities, and also the significant role that Africans played in the early Christian church. So let's look at Abraham's sojourn in Egypt. So as you can see on my screen, this is an African map, and you can locate Cyrene, which is Libya, and also Ethiopia on this map. So moving down to Abraham's sojourn in Egypt, how does that relate to African Christianity, or how Christianity came about in Africa? So, for Abraham's sojourn in Egypt, Abraham's journey to Egypt is documented in the book of Genesis, chapter 12. That's where you can find it. If you read through Genesis chapter 12, yeah, during a time of famine in Canaan, Abraham had to travel to Egypt with his wife Sarah. So, when they arrived in Egypt, Abraham became concerned that the Egyptians would kill him because of his beautiful wife Sarah. So, he therefore asked Sarah to say that she was his sister rather than his wife in order to protect himself. I guess you can remember this story clearly. So as they entered into Egypt, Pharaoh's official noticed Sarah's beauty and reported it to Pharaoh, who was the leader then in Egypt. So Pharaoh then invited Abraham to bring Sarah to his palace, where he became infatuated with her. So God, however, intervened for Abraham, and he then afflicted Pharaoh and his household with severe plagues. So Pharaoh, after realizing that Sarah was actually Abraham's wife, he rebuked Abraham for deceiving him. He then sent Abraham and Sarah out of Egypt along with all their possessions. So Abraham's sojourn in Egypt demonstrates the significance of cultural and economic exchange between ancient civilization. It also highlights the importance of Egypt in the biblical accounts, and also showcases the complex interaction between Abraham and the Egyptians. So, down to Joseph's rise in Egypt, which is another biblical presence in Africa. Egypt, we've talked about Abraham in Egypt. Now we're looking at Joseph rise in Egypt. So, the last person we'll be looking at is Jesus seeking refugee in Egypt precisely also. So for Joseph rise in Egypt, Joseph's story in Egypt is a very important part of the biblical narrative, because Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers. So he was taken to Egypt, where he was purchased by Potiphar, who was a high-ranking official in Pharaoh's court. So despite being a slave, Joseph's integrity, wisdom, and ability to interpret dreams caught the attention of Potiphar, who entrusted him with significant responsibility. So Joseph's success was short-lived, as Potiphar's wife falsely accused him of misconduct, which led to him being imprisoned. So even in prison, Joseph's ability to interpret dreams caught the attention of Pharaoh's official, and he was eventually summoned to interpret Pharaoh's dreams. So Joseph's interpretations of Pharaoh's dreams and his wise counsel impressed Pharaoh so much. Then he was appointed um Joseph was appointed as a trusted advisor of Pharaoh. That is how he rose in Egypt. That's how he became an official. That is how Joseph rise to power in Egypt in a very swift moment. So he became one of the most influential figures in Pharaoh's court. He also played a very important role in saving Egypt from famine by storing up grains during the years of plenty and also distributing it during the years of famine. So Joseph's story highlights the significant influence of biblical figures in ancient Egypt, and it also demonstrates the complex interactions between Israelites and Egyptians. So his rise to power, that's Joseph's rise to power, showcases the value placed on wisdom, intelligence, and integrity in ancient Egyptian society. So, moving on to the last part of biblical presence in Africa, we have Jesus' refuge in Egypt. Okay, for Jesus' refuge in Egypt, according to the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus and his family sought refuge in Egypt in order to escape King Herod's persecution. So, after the wise men from the east visited Jesus and worshipped him, they were warned in a dream not to return to Herod, and they departed for their country by a different route. So, Joseph, who was Jesus' earthly father, Joseph, who was Jesus' earthly father, he was also warned in a dream, just as the three wise men were warned in a dream to take Jesus and his mother, who was Mary, to Egypt and stay there until further instructions from God's angel. So, Jesus' refuge in Egypt highlights the significant role that Africa played in the life of Jesus and how the early Christian church came about. It also demonstrates the complex interactions between Jesus and the Egyptians, and also it showcases the importance of Egypt in early Christian history. So, the Coptic Church, which was one of the oldest Christian traditions in the world, celebrates Jesus' refuge in Egypt, and it also recognizes the significant role that Egypt played in the early Christian narrative. So, in conclusion to the stories of Abraham, Joseph, and Jesus, that their how they come about, their connections with African Christianity. It has a significant cultural and economic exchange between ancient civilization, and also highlights the importance of Africa in the biblical narratives. So these events, as is the event of both Abraham, Joseph, and Jesus, showcases the complex interactions between African and early Christians, and also demonstrates significance of the significant role that Africa played in shaping the course of Christian history. So now, what's the summary of these biblical connections? The biblical connections of Abraham,
Yeah, sorry, I don't
Joseph,
know. I
sorry,
cannot
and
see your screen. It's
Jesus.
showing green.
It's still showing, right? Okay. So the biblical connections of Abraham, Joseph, and Jesus with Africa is significant because it demonstrates the continent's role in shaping early Christianity. So, for Abraham's sojourn in Egypt, Abraham's journey to Egypt during a time of famine showcases the historical connections between ancient Egypt and the biblical narrative. So, this event highlights the importance of Egypt in the biblical accounts, and also it demonstrates the significant cultural and economic exchange between ancient civilization. Then, for Joseph's rise in Egypt, Joseph's story in Egypt is also an important is also a an important part of the biblical narrative because it demonstrates the complex interactions between Israelites and the Egyptians. So his rise to power in Egypt also showcases the value placed on wisdom, intelligence, and integrity in ancient Egyptian society, like I mentioned earlier, while narrating Joseph's rise in Egypt. Then, lastly, for Jesus' refuge in Egypt underscores the significance of Africa in early Christian history because this event, sorry, okay, I stopped at Jesus' refuge in Egypt. So for Jesus' refuge in Egypt, it underscores the significance of Africa in early Christian history. So this event demonstrates the complex interactions between Jesus and the Egyptians and also highlights the importance of Egypt in the development of Christianity. So moving down to Christianity in Africa, that's Christianity in Africa from the first century down to the 7th century. Let's quickly have an overview of Christianity in Africa from the first century down to the 7th century. So Christianity Africa arrived in Africa in the first century AD with the Coptic Orthodox Church of Egypt, attributing its spread to Mark, who was the evangelist, and he was reportedly seen to evangelize in Alexandria in 60 AD. So the early Christian centers in North Africa, and it included places like Egypt, Roman Africa, Ethiopia, and Nubia, which is Sudan. So for Egypt, Christianity took root in Egypt with Alexandria. The spelling of that Alexandria is Alexandria. So Alexandria became the hub for the continental development of Christianity in Egypt. Therefore, Roman Africa, that's how Christianity spread to Roman Africa, which included modern places like Tunisia, Libya, and some parts of Algeria. It showcases how Christianity spread to those areas. Then for Ethiopia had early contacts with Christianity, and the kingdom of Aksum, which is Aksum, became a significant Christian center in the 4th century AD. Then lastly, for Nubia, which is Sudan, Nubia had a significant Christian presence, with Christianity arriving in that region in the 1st century AD. Then we have some notable early North African Christians. Who are these notable early North African Christians? They include Tertullian, Cyprian, Augustine of Hippo, Origin of Alexandria, and Clement of Alexandria. So for Tertullian, he was a prolific writer and theologian from Carthage. So Tertullian was one of the earliest Christian writers in Latin. Take notes, was one of the earliest Christian writers in Latin. Therefore, Cyprian, that's Cyprian. Cyprian was a bishop of Carthage, so he played a crucial role in shaping Christian doctrine and practices in North Africa. Then Augustine of Hippo was a renowned theologian and philosopher. So Augustine's writing had a profound impact on Western Christianity. Then we have Origin of Alexandria, who was a scholar and theologian. So Origin made significant contributions to biblical interpretation and Christian doctrine. Then lastly, for Clement of Alexandria, he was a Christian scholar and theologian. So Clement played a very important role in shaping early Christian thoughts in Alexandria. So moving down to the influence of North African Christianity, basically this is Augustine of Hippo. This is the man known as Augustine of Hippo. If you can see the picture on your screen. So for the influence of North African Christianity, the influence of North African Christianity. North African Christianity had a profound impact on the development of Christianity worldwide. And some of the key influence includes the composition of hymns and worship regulations because North African Christians contributed to the development of hymns and worship regulations that were adopted by other Christian communities. Then another influence can be seen in the great leaders and theologians. So we have how North Africa produced influential Christian leaders and theologians who shaped Christian doctrines and practices. Then the third influence can be seen in the theological education, whereby North Africa was home to prominent centers of theological education, which played a crucial role in shaping Christian thoughts. Then we also have doctrinal formulation. That's how North African Christians played a key role in shaping Christian doctrine, particularly in the areas of Christology and eschatology. Then we have the unity of peoples also as another influence of North African Christianity. The unity of people has to do with how Christianity promoted unity among diverse peoples by fostering a sense of community and shared faith. So these are the influences of North African Christianity. But to highlight them, let me quickly highlight them one after the other. One of the influence of North African Christianity by highlighting one of it is the composition of hymns and worship revolution. The second aspect is great leaders and theologians. The third one is theological education. Fourthly, doctrinal formulation. Then lastly, we have unity of peoples. So let's look at the decline of North African Christianity. What contributed to the decline of Christianity in North Africa? So, the decline of Christianity in North Africa was a complex and multifaceted process that can be attributed to several factors. So, one of the primary reasons was the recurring internal wars and external invasions that plagued the region during late antiquity. So these conflicts weakened the Christian communities, making it challenging for them to sustain themselves. Additionally to that, we have the fear of persecution by invaders, which led to a decline in the number of Christians as many chose to flee or abandon their faith of Christianity. Another significant factor that led to the decline of Christianity in Africa was the lack of leadership within the Christian church in Africa, because the church's internal divisions and a lack of strong leadership made it vulnerable to external pressure, and it also hindered its ability to respond effectively to the challenges it faced. Furthermore, we also have how the inhabitants under Muslim rule often found it difficult often found it difficult to adapt to um the pragmatic nature of Islam, which further eroded the Christian communities. So the Muslim conquest of North Africa in the 7th century AD also marked a significant turning point in the decline of Christianity, as it led to the loss of Christian institutions and infrastructure in North Africa. So basically, the decline of Christian institutions and infrastructure made it difficult for Christianity to sustain itself, and the spread of Islam also led to the cultural assimilation, with many Christians choosing to adopt Islamic practices and traditions rather than continue with the Christianity process. So the combination of these factors ultimately led to the downfall or to the decline of Christianity in North Africa, which was a region that was once a driving center of Christian thoughts and practices. So, considering Portuguese missionary efforts in 15th to 17th century, that's where we'll be moving on to next. The Portuguese missionary efforts in 15th to 17th century. So, during the 15th to 17th centuries, the Portuguese missionaries played a significant role in spreading Christianity in West and East Africa. We have how the Portuguese Padrado system, which granted Portugal sole patronage of the continent, which was Africa, and it's enabled missionaries to establish themselves in various regions. We have Jesuit missionaries who were particularly active in Africa during this period. So they established missions in the Congo Kingdom. That time the Congo was spelled Kongo instead of Congo. So they established missions in the Congo Kingdom, the Mozambique, and Angola, and also developed upon pre-existing Catholic missions. So the Portuguese missionaries worked tirelessly to spread Christianity, often in challenging circumstances, because they faced numerous obstacles such as disease, harsh climates, and also I think language barriers part of it, or cultural barriers. So despite these challenges, the missionaries persevered, driven by their conviction to spread Christian faith. So they had to endure these challenges or these factors of harsh climate, disease, and cultural barriers that was prevalent in Africa. So they also collaborated with colonial powers, which sometimes led to conflicts with local population. So the missionary efforts were not without controversy or obstacles. So, however, as their activities often led to the erosion of African cultures and religion. Oh man, I need water. Sorry, the Portuguese missionary efforts in Africa were significant, but they were not without challenges. So the missionaries faced significant cultural barriers, including difference in language, customs, and tradition. I think I've mentioned that before. So many local populations resisted the missionaries' efforts because they often viewed them as agents of colonialism. So the missionaries also faced significant health risk, and we know the health risk that they faced. That was the harsh climate, because you cannot compare the skin of a black man with that of a white man. Imagine a white man coming to Africa when the sun is very when this when the weather is hot, particularly because they might get red basically. So we cannot compare their skin color with our own. So some of the challenges faced by the Portuguese missions includes the Portuguese missions in Africa. They faced several challenges, and I've mentioned earlier in when I was narrating the Portuguese mission from 15th to 17th century. So the Portuguese mission in Africa faced several challenges, and some of the challenges included cultural barriers and resistance from local populations, disease, and harsh climate conditions. So the missionaries encountered significant cultural barriers, including differences in language, customs, and traditions. However, many local populations also resisted the missionary efforts, often viewing them as agents of
Hello, ma'am.
colonialism. Yes.
Hello.
Okay, as I was saying, the missionaries encountered significant cultural barriers, including differences in language, customs, and traditions. And many local populations resisted the missionary efforts because they often viewed them as agents of colonialism. So the missionaries also faced significant health risks, including disease and harsh climate conditions. So, despite these challenges, the Portuguese missions played a significant role in spreading Christianity in Africa. So, the missionaries' efforts laid the foundation for the growth of Christianity on the continent, and their legacy has continued to shape the lives of millions of Africans today. So, but it is essential for us to acknowledge the complexities and challenges of these missionary enterprises, including the erosion of African culture and the conflict with local populations. So, by understanding the history of Christianity in Africa, we can appreciate the complex nature of the faith spread on the continent, as African continents, particularly. So now the question is, what is the legacy of Portuguese Christianity mission? What is their legacy, or what is the impact of this Portuguese Christianity mission in Africa? We have the positive impact, we have the negative impact, and we also have the lasting impact. For the positive impact, we have the spread of Christianity. We have how the Portuguese missionaries played a significant role in spreading Christianity globally, particularly in Africa and Asia. Then we also have cultural exchange as another positive impact of the Portuguese Christianity missions. For the cultural exchange, we have how the mission facilitated cultural exchange between different societies by promoting the sharing of knowledge, ideas, and values. So this exchange had a profound impact on the cultural identities of many communities. Then thirdly, under the positive impact of Portuguese Christianity missions, we have education and healthcare. For the education and healthcare aspect, you have how the Portuguese missionaries established schools, hospitals, and other institutions that provided essential services to local populations. So these institutions not only promoted education and healthcare, but also served as centers for spiritual instruction. Then, for the negative impacts of the Portuguese mission, we have colonialism and exploitation as one of it. The Portuguese missions were often likened to colonial power, or they were often linked to colonial power by contributing to the displacement. They believe that the colonial power or the Portuguese mission added to the displacement, exploitation, and cultural suppression of indigenous population by the colonial powers. So this legacy of colonialism continues to shape the identities and experiences of many communities. Then we also have cultural imperialism, how the imposition of Portuguese cultures and values on local population led to the erosion of traditional practices and identities. So this cultural imperialism has had a lasting impact on the cultural heritage of many communities. Then lastly, we have limited understanding as another negative impact of Portuguese mission. So under this aspect, we have how some missionaries lacked a deep understanding of local cultures and languages, which hindered their effectiveness in spreading Christianity and also building meaningful relationship with local population. So these were the three negative impacts of the Portuguese mission in Africa. Then for the lasting legacy, we have the lasting impact of the Portuguese mission. I've considered the positive impact, negative impact, now down to the lasting impact. One of the lasting impact there is Christianity in former colonies, whereby the legacy of Portuguese mission can be seen in the continued presence of Christianity in many former colonies. We have how Catholicism, that's Catholic, remains a dominant religion in countries such as um the Congo, Algeria, Brazil, and the rest. That's some colonies. But basically Brazil and Portugal were not African colonies. So we have cultural heritage as another lasting impact of the Portuguese mission. Under the cultural heritage, we have how the missions have left a lasting impact on the cultural heritage of many communities, with many historical sites and monuments still standing today. Then we have missionary work today as another lasting impact. The missionary work can be seen in greater emphasis on social justice, integral human development, and inculturation, whereby modern missionary work prioritize building meaningful relationship with local population and also promoting cultural understanding. So let's quickly look at some
So
comparison
now
of
dreams they do.
okay, let's take some comparisons between the North African and Portuguese Christianity. One comparison there is the historical roots, whereby North African Christianity dates back to the Roman era with influences from indigenous Berber and Punic cultures. Then we have how Portuguese Christianity, on the other hand, was introduced during the Reconquista and solidified ages. That's during the age of exploration. That's why the Portuguese Christianity came about. Therefore, the African Christianity it had its historical roots in the Roman era. Then another comparison can be seen in the cultural influence, whereby the North African Christianity was shaped by African and Roman traditions, while Portuguese Christianity was influenced by or was shaped by European and Mediterranean cultures. Then, thirdly, under the comparison, we have theological emphasis, how North African Christianity emphasized practical manifestation of God's goodness and love, similar to the indigenous African concept of Ubuntu, as UBUNTU. Then Portuguese, on the other hand, Portuguese Christianity was during the exploration age. And it also emphasized evangelization and conversion. Then we have the missionary work as another comparison. Then we have colonial legacy, we have indigenous expression, and then we have church structure. So these are the comparison of North African versus Portuguese Christianity. So I think we've come to the end of today's lesson, but it's not today. We've come to the end of today's class, but not today's lesson because I still have to do revision with you guys. So let me check. If you have any question, you can ask. So before I start with my revision, basically I'll be considering past questions. Sarah's past questions. So do you have any question? If you have any question, you can signify. If you don't have any question, I can move on with my question. Okay, with regards to no question, thank you very much. I'll be starting my revision questions and I'll be taking topics from week 4, no, week 11. Abi, let me start from week 10 down to week 13. I'll be taking questions from week 10 down to week 13. So to be an interactive section, I'll ask you questions from past questions, basically from previous topics, and I'll need a response. So the first question is, hope you can hear me, Michelle. The first question is under the major and minor prophets topic on major and minor prophets. So the first question is, what is the primary distinction between major and minor prophets? If you want me to repeat the question, you can just let me know. So the question is, what is the primary distinction between major and minor prophets? Option A, length of their prophecies. Option B, importance of their messages. Option C, time period of their prophecies. And lastly, geographical location of their prophecies. Kennedy, what's the answer, please?
Option A, length of their prophecies.
Okay, thank you very much. Why is the length of their prophecies? Can you elaborate?
Like we will talk about the major prophets like the Isaiah, Jeremiah, their write-up is quite lengthy. Then
Uh-huh.
the minor prophets like Habakkuk and also all those on their write-up is quite scanty.
That's the final answer. Thank you very much. So move to question 2. Says, which prophets emphasize the theme of holiness? See under the topic major and minor prophets. So which prophets emphasize the theme of holiness? Option A, Isaiah. Option B, Hosea. Option C, Amos. And option D, Jeremiah. Should I take the question again? Olasubomi, do you want to answer? You can go on.
Yes, it is Amos.
Amos.
Yes,
Sorry, can you repeat that?
yes, it is Amos.
Amos. Okay. I said, let me read the question again. I said, which prophet emphasized the theme of holiness? Holiness. Is it Isaiah, Hosea, Amos, or Jeremiah? Which of them? Olasubomi, do you still want to answer? Or another person can?
Another person can answer.
Okay, so who wants to answer the question? Kennedy, you can go on, please. And just know that you
Isaiah.
elaborate too. Why is it Isaiah? Why is it
Isaiah
Isaiah and
emphasized
not Jeremiah or Amos or whatever prophets? But it had to be Isaiah. Why is it Isaiah?
the emphasis of God's holiness was actually the message of Isaiah because he emphasized most especially on God's holiness. Unlike like even Ezekiel to speak about holiness, but Isaiah focused on the overwhelming, majestical, and the nature of God's holiness, particularly on its prominence.
Ah, we have scholars, so yeah, scholar. Thank you very much. Okay, the third question under major and minor prophets also before we move on to another question on historical background to the New Testament. For the last question on major and minor prophets, we have, what is the relevance of the prophet's message to nation building? What's the relevance of the prophet's messages to nation building? Is it A, they provide guidance on economic development? B, they emphasize the importance of social justice? C, they promote cultural exchange? And D, they focused on military conquest? Should I come again?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, my question is, what is the relevance of the prophet's messages to nation building? Is it A, they provide guidance on economic development? B, they emphasize the importance of social justice? C, they promote cultural exchange? And D, they focus on military conquest? The question is tricky.
Eh,
Huh? Okay, the answer to that, since nobody's responding, the answer to that is they emphasize the importance of social justice, because they cannot provide guidance on economic development. Rather, can they promote cultural exchange or focus on military conquest? Rather, they emphasize the importance of social justice, just as how we have how Prophet Amos, his key theme or his prophetic theme was on social justice. So basically, their main focus would be on social justice. If another prophetic theme was here, maybe holiness or or love, or another theme, or prophet of doom, which is Ezekiel, it could have been the answer. But now we have, they emphasize the importance of social justice, and we're talking about major prophets and minor prophet questions on that. So particularly, they emphasize the importance of social justice is the correct answer. Now, for the question on historical background to the New Testament, this question is a bit tricky to be, but I go try, sha. So, for the question on historical background to the New Testament, the first question there is, under which empire was Israel during the New Testament period? Under which empire was Israel during the New Testament period? Option A, Roman Empire. B, Greek Empire. C, Persian Empire. And lastly, Babylonian Empire. Kennedy, you can answer it.
it's under Roman Empire. That was
Right.
under 63 BCE to 135 CE.
Okay, that's correct. That was when the canonization or the writing of the New Testament began. Olasubomi, I hope you are following. Oh.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So the next question I'll be taking is under that historical background to the New Testament. Which Jewish group believed in the resurrection of the dead? No, we had four Jewish group. That's the Pharisees, Sadducees, Zealots, and the Essence. So which of these Jewish group believed in the resurrection of the dead? Is it the Pharisees? Is it the Sadducees? Is it the Zealots? Or is it the Essence? Which of them? Kennedy, your hand is up.
The Pharisee.
Olasubami, what do you say?
I think it's the Pharisee.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. That's absolutely correct. Thank you very much. So the third question on that aspect, we'll have, what was the primary focus of the zealots? What was the primary focus of the zealots? A, spiritual renewal. B, political revolution. C, social welfare. And D, economic development. Kennedy, you can answer it.
The
Or should
there
I
is the
repeat the
primary.
question?
Okay, yes, yes.
Okay. I say, what was the primary focus of the zealots? A. Spiritual renewal. B. Political revolution. C. Social welfare. And lastly, economic development.
Political welfare.
Political
The option is one of them is political welfare, Nabi.
political revolution.
Sorry, political revolution.
Okay, why is it political revolution?
The zealots actually fought for resistance and revolt against the Roman
Sha.
rule.
That's correct. That's correct. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the synoptic gospels and synoptic problem. The first question under that topic is, which gospels are considered the synoptic gospel? Which gospel is known as the synoptic gospel? Which of them? Is it Matthew, Mark, and Luke? Is it Matthew, Mark, and John? Is it Luke, John, and Acts? Is it Matthew, Luke, and Acts? Which books makes up the synoptic gospel? Ola
Matthew,
Subomi can answer.
Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you. So under that same topic, we have, what is the synoptic problem? What do you understand by the synoptic problem? Option A, the question of authorship of the gospel. B, the relationship between the synoptic gospel. C, the historical context of the gospels. And D, the theological themes of the gospels. Want to answer? Want to answer? Should I repeat the question?
Yes, please repeat the question.
Okay, the question is, what is the synoptic problem? What do you understand by the synoptic problem? Option A, the question of authorship of the gospel. Option B, the relationship between the synoptic gospels. Option C, the historical context of the gospels. And lastly, the theological themes of the gospels.
I think it should be the question about the authorship of the synoptic gospel.
What do you say? Can you repeat that? No
I said
audible.
I think it is a
A, that's the question of authorship of the gospels.
yes,
Mm, the synoptic problem is talking about the similarities and differences between the synoptic gospel. So basically, it's talking about the relationship between the three gospels. That's the book of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So basically, option B is the correct answer. That's the relationship between the synoptic gospel, because we have how some scholars are debating, or they're trying to understand the relationship between the three gospels, what they have in common and what they do not have in common. That's their similarities and differences. Is that taken?
yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the attempt you tried. Okay, let's see. Let me check for one tough question. Hmm. Okay, under the writing and canonization of the New Testament, the question there is, what process what process led to the formation of the New Testament canon? What process led to the formation of the New Testament canon? A, Council of Nicaea, that's Nicaea. B, Council of Trent. C, gradual recognition by early Christian communities. And lastly, imperial degree. I'll take that again. What process led to the formation of the New Testament's canon? A. Council of Nicaea. B. Council of Trent. C. Gradual recognition by early Christian communities. And D. Imperial decree. Do you understand the question? It's talking about the formation and composition of the New Testament. That's the process that led to the formation of the New Testament. You know the steps, not the process. Like the first one has to do with the collections of the text. Then you have to do the second one is the recognition by the council or authoritative people. Then we have that I've even mentioned the answer. That's the gradual recognition by early Christian communities. That's the council. Then we have the compilation and formation as the last stage. So is that taken?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I think I'm done here. Please, oh, you can go and listen to the replays of the lessons since your exam is in, I think, 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Sha. Do well with your exams. If you need questions, you can go to the JUPEB app, answer them, attempt them for 1 hour at least. Try your exam. Good luck. Thank you very much for your time.